Hi, I'm Jeremy Crosby.
And I'm Nick Boucher. We're your hosts for the program that's all about your city, Talking Fitchburg.
Every weekday, we pull together the news, events, and information you need to stay on top of what's happening in the city of Fitchburg.
Find Talking Fitchburg on cable TV, Roku, Amazon Fire, Apple TV, and our live stream on the web. Plus, you can find all our headlines and stories on Facebook, YouTube, and our video on demand service. This is your city.
Keep up with Talking Fitchburg and the issues affecting you and your neighbors.
Want to know what's happening in your city? Get Notify Me messages from the City of Fitchburg. Visit fitchburgwi.gov on your computer or mobile device and select the big Notify Me button on the left. Enter your email and/or phone number, whichever is best for you to get notifications. Scroll down the list and select all the topics you're interested in to receive email or text messages about. You'll be notified every time one of your topics is updated. Sign up for Notify Me, one more way to keep up with your Fitchburg government.
I call to order the meeting of the Committee of the Whole on October 29, 2025 at 6:01 p.m. First item of business is the Pledge of Allegiance. Please stand.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next item is the roll call. Administrator Brecklin, will you help us out?
Absolutely. Mayor Arata Frada. Here. Alder Dantzler Jr.
Here.
Alder Gerhardt.
Here.
Alder Herbst is delayed. Alder Jetzer.
Here.
Alder Laduse.
Here.
Alder Maldonado is absent with excuse. And Alder Reichstedt.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. Next is item 4, approval of minutes. I'll need a motion on the September 24, 2025 draft minutes for the Committee of the Whole.
So moved. Second.
Motion approved by Dantzler, second by Jetzer. Any comments or questions? Seeing none, all in favor of accepting the minutes, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Next is public appearances for non-agenda items. We have nobody in chambers nor online for non-agenda items. So we can move on to item 6, agenda items. 6A, 2026 proposed budget amendments process introduction from our Finance Director, Misty.
Thank you. So I'd like to start letting everybody know how to find the packet. So out on the city's website, if you go to Government and then Finance, and then over to Financial Records and Reports, all of our budget stuff is right here in this first section, and you can click on the 2026 Budget Council Proposed Amendments packet. When you're in the packet, the bookmarks work really well as you're trying to navigate the document. And then there's a summary in here. So there were 4 amendments submitted by council members, and there was 1 amendment submitted by me as an omnibus amendment. We'll talk about that one tonight as well. When you're looking at this chart, the 2 things that we kind of monitor as far as our financial constraints for this purpose is our levy limit and our expenditure restraint program, incentive program limit. So the general fund, the impact on those 2 programs may vary. So that's why there's a red column and a purple column. But then all the purple columns would be the amounts that impact our levy limit. You'll notice none of the amendments that were submitted impact levy limit. And we do have one that will have an impact on our expenditure restraint program. But again, we'll talk about that when we get to there. The bottom of this form then shows you that expenditure restraint incentive program compliance and how we calculated that. And we have a fair amount of capacity still in that program. And then the lower box is the comparison to the property tax levy. And then it also calculates the rates and the average home. So you can see kind of at all the different stages what those amounts were. I'll remind you that the mayor's proposed budget had $43 left in levy limit capacity. At this point, we do have final numbers, so that average home impact was just right. So it's an $83 increase on the average home with that tax rate that's listed. So those are the summaries. Then each one of the amendments has a form attached with it. So in the top, you can see what the levy limit impact is and what amendment number it is. And then the boxes are what the amendment is, why it's proposed, and then finance director's notes if there's anything. and then the impact from an accounting perspective is in the chart at the bottom. And then some of the amendments also have a staff memo attached, which is there for additional context and information. And so tonight, the goal is to have thorough discussion. Make sure you understand what the amendments are proposing, have all of your questions answered. We're not voting on anything tonight. This is just information gathering. Then when we go to the next council meeting in 2 weeks, that's where we'll actually vote on them. It is very strict timelines and very strict on how many times you can speak. So again, the goal is to get all that discussion out now, free will as long as you would like, but then when it comes to actual adoption, it's much more restricted. So make sure you get all your questions answered tonight. That's all I have.
Thanks, Misty. Any questions for Misty? Wonderful. We can move on to 6B, 2026 Proposed Budget Amendment Discussion. Again, this is discussion only. No action is going to be taken, so we need no motions. First amendment is number 1. Dave, would you like to introduce this?
Yes, I'm just, we had $100,000 in the budget for communication regarding city projects. In my time here, majority of, with the exception of the spending referendum, the projects themselves have bore the cost for any required communication. The example I would give you was Fish Hatchery Road and also Verona Road, keeping the businesses open, placards and things like that, and that was part of the project. I think it's hubris on our part to include this after spending referendum was voted down, and the wheel tax has generated much angst amongst the residents. I think this is the responsible thing to do. Plus, we have these cards, in case you haven't known, that we have many ways to communicate with the residents that they can find out about projects. So I feel this is unnecessary.
Thanks, Dave. Mayor.
Yeah, so I want to clarify that this $100,000 are in the TIT closure. It's no levy money. And also I want to tell you why I left the money there. Because next year we are going to have big project coming to the city of Fitchburg, the comp plan and the zoning code and the Ficherona, and we will need to, communicate, especially the comp plan. I was involved in the one in 2019, and you need to do a lot of outreach to the resident because they need to participate in the process, and we need to have some additional funding for that type of communication, outreach. And also we feature, I don't remember, do we include communication money for Ficherona Zion Road?
I don't know if there's a specific. I don't know if there's a specific line item there or not. Maybe some, but that would largely be done from a staff perspective with the typical communications that we have on many other projects, such as the Zion Road project. We don't have anybody assisting with communication, so what you would see there is basically what we've done with Zion Road.
With the citizen, the new flash and all of that. Yeah.
It was part of the project, Chad. We hired a consultant that she handled, placards and things like that.
So you're referring to Fish Hatchery Road,
Fish
correct?
Hatchery Road.
Yes, that is absolutely
not
correct,
as much on Verona,
as well as Verona Road. But we were talking about Ficherona, the upcoming reconstruction project. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Just a quick question for Chad. Is there anything the staff would like to add in terms of that funding, plans for that funding discussion on that before we continue the conversation?
Well, we still are working through creation of a communications and outreach plan that would provide some citywide guidance and potentially aid in centralizing our communications functions. So we aren't yet sure if that will require any additional funding to, one, complete the plan or aid in implementation of the plan. There could be other things that come up throughout the course of the year. As we mentioned last night, there was a couple of meetings have taken place on a fire and EMS district. And for instance, if, communities decided to go and further explore that route or implement that route, certainly some communication with our residents would be appropriate, and perhaps having some funding available for something like that could be valuable. Because this is not levy money, it is advantageous for staff, in particular, to have some money available for communications and outreach if needed. And maybe it's one of those things that after over the course of another year, if this does remain available, if it's not utilized in the ways in which we thought it could potentially be utilized, perhaps it would be appropriate in the next operating budget for it to be adjusted by Common Council or the mayor.
Donald.
Yeah, and like all the herbs, like I hear your point, and I don't disagree. Like I think, like we think that the information is getting out there, and we have different modalities of doing so. But like one of the pervasive themes of like talking with residents or being in the community, even at our district listening session in District 3, the one we had at the fire station, probably the pervasive theme for that was folks felt they didn't know where to find information necessarily, or it wasn't readily in front of them enough to the fact of what they wanted. Logan and myself, we did something over at the Limerick, and they were like, that we had these cards that were in their foyer area, and they were like, well, that's not enough either. Like we need to put something else like out there and do more outreach. And even one point came up that said, we didn't know that in our referendum, there was a communications part of it. They were like, well, we didn't hear about that. And I'm not saying that the city didn't do a good job, because there were several presentations. I attended some myself, and you all did an excellent job. But I think this communications thing is coming more for the public versus like what I feel like the information from us, like we're up here, we know where to look on the web pages, we know where to find things, so it's like a little easier to navigate. But I do think just so maybe we can stop hearing some of these things, or try to support the residents a little more about where they are in terms of our communication efforts, and making sure they're well versed in what's going on, what we're doing, where we are. And instead of them always trying to meet us, maybe we can meet them where they are a little bit more to utilize these funds.
Logan.
I'll start by saying I appreciate all the herbs for you bringing this up to have this discussion. Obviously, my professional background is in communications and journalism, so I will try not to let that color my opinions too much. But to build on what my colleague Alder Dantzler was just saying, we do, to your point too, Alder Herbst, from your rationale for the amendment, we have so many different ways that we're reaching folks. I mean, everything from the email list, we have FACTv, we have social media, we will put things in the Fitchburg Star, whether it's paid, whether it's a letter to the editor. We work with our local media partners outside of the Fitchburg Star as well. I put together, for example, a monthly newsletter that I go through all the things that are relevant to District 3 and put that in there. I'm updating my personal social media. I will reach out to residents that I know are directly affected by projects. I'm also going and going to events like I mentioned on Monday, talking to 130 or more residents in Terra Vesa. And the mayor and I went door to door in some of our newer parts of District 3 with cards and said, here's how you get signed up. Here's how you get connected with the city and know what's going on. And even despite all of that, I'm still hearing the city is not doing a good enough job with communication. So it's tough for me to want to cut at least the full 100,000, especially with the communications plan lingering out there for 2026. I'm already thinking of ideas where to Alder Dantzler's point as well about meeting folks where they are, finding ways that we can, without putting too much extra burden on staff, reach community members, whether that's putting digital display boards with regular reminders in some of our parks, or at the hub, or in park shelters. FACTv, for example, already has a community digital bulletin board. If we were able, and I talked to Jeremy Crosby about this shortly after I was elected, if we were able to get an internet connection out there, we should be able to, if you just put a TV in a hotspot, you should be able to update all those bulletin boards remotely. So that would then negate the need for city staff to go all these different places to post meeting notices and things like that. When we've even talked about our official meeting notices, they're posted at the community center and at the library and here at City Hall, all of which are on the same campus in the same, block of our 35 square mile city. So I think there's more we need to do, and I would like to see what we finish up with in the communications plan before making that. At the same point, I also don't think that a comprehensive plan update in Fitch-Rona Road project would need the entire $100,000. So if we could refrain from spending it at all and keep it budgeted for this year, and then once we have the communication plan and we know what our goals and our visions are and what our community expectations are from there, I'd love to have the same conversation 12 months from now and see if we want to cut 150 or if we want to cut 75 or if we want to add 250. I just feel like I don't have enough information without the comms plan outstanding. And I feel like I don't know that I can do much more to reach out to residents short of going door to door, which was quite grueling in the winter months and very time consuming. So I guess I'm somewhere in the middle on this one where I don't want to spend it just because it's in the budget. I also think it's one of those things that we need to be focusing on, not only how we're communicating, but the language we're using with folks so that we're doing it in a manner that's approachable and understandable for folks who aren't living in government land and talking about TIDS and ARPA funding and all the acronyms we throw around here like, we do all the time. And I also think about from an equity lens, do we need to be doing more outreach for folks in non-English language materials? Would that be something we'd need to keep in mind for some of these discussions moving forward?
I'll add my 2 cents. It is a big number, and so I appreciate that we face tight budgets and there are other things, but this is TID closure money. So for anyone watching, that's tax increment district money. So when we close the tax increment district at the end of its life, all that extra money that was created by the economic development was going into a fund, and anything that's left over that was not spent, part of it goes back to the taxpayers, and part of it goes just into a city fund that we can use for one-time projects. So they can only be used for one-time projects. It can't be for things like hiring staff. And we've had quite a bit of this money for a while, and I think we've got some interest money on it over the years. So we've actually had more than we even anticipated, which was nice. So because this is coming from the TID closure fund and not from the levy, I do think about this a little bit differently. We have allocated and reallocated money through the TID closure over the last several years. How many years? It's been like 4 years?
TID 7, which was the first one, closed in like 2017 or something.
Okay.
But the big money came in recently.
Most of this money was in the last few years. So we've had this access to this money for a while. And what's nice about it is flexible. We are able to reallocate it. So I would also hope that we wouldn't need $100,000, but I also could see situations where you could draw down those funds if you have to hire, if you have to run an in-person session, for example, in multiple places around the city to talk about the comp plan. That could be expensive. Mailings, I actually think, are quite effective. I think they've become more relevant in our digital world, and mailings get very expensive very fast when you're talking about as many residents as we have. And so even a couple mailings could chip into that. And then also I'm excited that the city has been, after the failed referendum, the city's been doing a really good job taking a look at, okay, the citizens told us no. How are we going to reorganize our staff and our processes so that we can do more with the constraints that we currently have? And so that looks like, number one, the reorganization of the police department, which creates some issues like getting rid of the dispatch, right? But we're going to have more officers, right? And then not more officers, but more leadership within the police department, more really needed roles. And then reorganizing the parks and the recreation and the senior center into like a community services department, which is really deploying our resources effectively. So I think communications is just another one of those pieces. Like, we didn't get the communications director through the referendum. So now we're looking at how can we do better communications in the current structure of the city that we have already. And so I do think having funding set aside to implement whatever those recommendations end up being will be important. So I hope, like Logan said, like I hope we don't have to spend $100,000 on this, but I don't think it's bad to have it sitting in a line item. And I think if something more pressing comes up mid-year, I think there's a very good chance that we could reallocate some of that money to those other pressing needs. But yeah, if this were levy money, I would think differently. But given the TID closure context, I'm pretty comfortable with it. Anyone else?
And then I just got one comment.
Please do.
Three things. So one, Logan, I heard about your district. It's different in my district. It's a more established neighborhood, and so the people, I don't want to say they know what's going on, but they've been around longer. So there's a difference there. Second, I bristle and it's not taxpayer money, it's TID money. No, it's all taxpayer money, and there's other things I feel more concrete we could use it for. And third, I don't think the minutia of this Fitchburg City Council and what's going on with their activities is the top of the list for residents. I think it's quite a ways down. Their family, they're taking care of their family, getting their school kids to activities, bills. It's pretty low on the list, and I think we do it pretty. We have lots of options. So I'll shut up now. Okay.
Anyone else? Bill?
Well, yeah, I agree with you, Dave, that the average citizen doesn't pay a lot of attention to local government, and they shouldn't need to, but every once in a while they have to. And if we don't do a good enough job with our communication, they come to a meeting asking why they never heard about this enormous thing until the Friday before the Monday that it was going to happen. And our response is always, well, we've had 3 public involvement meetings and, 2 ads in the Fitchburg Star already. So I think, fundamentally it is a problem that trying to just beat people over the head with the information until they finally notice that it exists. And Logan listed about 140 different channels that we communicate out on.
That was by design for folks watching.
Yeah. And yet it's not enough. So I think, having these funds available is probably going to be, it should prove useful. And, maybe we can, I don't know if we can spend some of those funds asking somebody for some advice on how we actually get people to pay attention.
Micah?
I'll be quick. I'll just say we do have a lot of ways that this information gets out there, and I will commend city staff for the work they do in putting it out there, especially Facebook, YouTube, all of that. I mean, they work really hard on getting it out there, and it's available. But there is a fundamental disconnect in that it's the number one message I hear also is that people don't know what's going on in the city. And I don't have a solution right now as to how to bridge that gap. But I think I would just say as we look forward to this, the comp plan is going to be really important. And I would just hope that I think this money should be there. But I think that if we are going to spend it on something like the comp plan, that we should think creatively and outside of the box of how we've done things in the future about promoting that, and that this money shouldn't just be spent on like 3 public information sessions that no one comes to, and that we look at different ways to actually try to somehow bridge that divide, or like Bill said, find someone who maybe has some solutions, because the information is there and the people say they're not getting it, and there's just a disconnect, and we have to somehow build a bridge between those 2 places. So,
Logan?
Yeah, I think this gets a little bit at my professional area of I don't know if I want to say expertise, if that's too arrogant, but where I've spent the past decade of my career. It's kind of you can lead a horse to water, you can't make them drink. It's the same type of thing. And to Alder Herp's point, and to Alder Jetzer's point as well, I really hope, for the sake of all 36,000 of our residents, that what happens at Fitchburg City Hall is not at the top of their list of priorities, because that would, to me, indicate that something has gone terribly wrong. Because usually, people don't care how the sausage gets made as long as it ends up in the grocery store shelves. I think one of the challenges, that I see not only in local government but just all over the place is there's so much fighting for our attention these days that we have to have a multifaceted strategy. We need to have an octopus with 20 arms instead of 8, because the days where everybody was reading the Fitchburg Star, which would come out 5 days a week, they're gone. Once a month, the Fitchburg Star publication, for example, the way that their cycle works out, it will miss things. For example, the vehicle registration fee, that there was nothing in there until after that meeting because the notice that went out with sufficient heads up, but it just missed the cutoff for their publication for whichever, I think it was the March paper. So then it didn't get until April, and the publication date for April was after that meeting where that was already happening. So if I'm thinking about this since we're also kind of losing some of our outside help on this, so we have to almost take a little bit more of the initiative and the role ourselves to actually do some of these things that traditionally may have been handled by our local media, and that's not to slight my former colleagues in that sphere of the world by any stretch, especially since I see a camera in the back of the room right now. I guess the one question I did have, kind of more process question, is if we, at this point, could we make a friendly amendment to the amendment and say reduce the 100,000 to 50, or?
You can do that on the night.
Okay.
But keeping in mind that there's still only 2 opportunities for everyone to speak and a total cap of 5 minutes. So if you want to talk about that generally, we can talk about it. But
okay, thank you.
And again, I don't think Alder Herbst's amendment is anything outlandish. I get where it's coming from, but like you said, it may not be at the top of everybody's list until it is. And or to run with your analogy, people don't care how the sausage is made until they find out it's pork and they want chicken or turkey sausage, or they're vegan and they don't want any sausage at all, and that's the only thing we offer. I'm serious. Things aren't a problem until they actually are. And I feel like if we can, and again, it doesn't have to be like folks have said, the whole $100,000, but we can keep something and be proactive and kind of get ahead of the curve versus reactive where we're trying to scramble and get information out. And I'm not saying we've done that in the past, but I'd just be more comfortable with these, having some funds for different modalities to be displayed and get information out there. And that's all I'm trying to say with my comments related to this amendment and to our communication plan that will be finished at some point. So,
in terms of changing the amount, if there was a subsequent amendment to this to reallocate some of these funds to something different, I might think of that differently. But in lieu of something to replace for that 50,000 to go to, I don't see any reason why we should just remove it without replacing it, because we can change the budget at any time during the year. Now, it's different, right? Because we have to have a 2/3 vote whenever we change the budget later on in the year. But if we remove 50,000 now, and then later wanted to allocate that 50,000 next year, it still would require a 2/3 vote. It just, we wouldn't, you know what I mean? So anyway, I just don't, I think where there is always the opportunity to reallocate that money mid-year if we need to. That's all I wanted to say.
Can I?
Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Dave, you said to remove this $100,000. What you're planning to reallocate that money, $100,000, because it's in the TID closure fund.
It's still in the TID closure.
So,
I think there's many.
so you're going to keep it in the TID closure
It's
fund.
still in the TID closure. I
so-
prefer it to be used for something better.
Well, we can keep it here in the communication, and then we can use it if we need to go there to use it for other things. But you still keep it in the TID closure fund.
Better just leave it. If you put it in comms, you're going to eat it up. Okay. That's all.
Okay.
Thank you.
Other comments? Any final words, Dave?
No.
Okay. Well, thank you. We have wrapped discussion on Amendment 1, so now we will move on to Amendment 2. Alder Lattice, would you like to introduce this?
Yeah, sure. This is to add an AED and a box to McGaw Park. We just did the pickleball lights. That's who I was talking to about this. We have over 100 people there every Friday in the summers, and now we're also talking about having tournaments in McGaw Park. And for me, this is just, I mean, I agree with their logic on this. This is a safety issue. This is something that costs a relatively small amount of money, and if it needs to be used while it's in the park, it's priceless. And so, yeah, so that's my kind of rationale. I can address some of the concerns from the staff memo. I had talked to EMS. They've been consultants on this. They were fine with having it in there. They also agreed to provide training to the pickleball community on how to use it. So that was nice to see as well. In terms of other locations, I mean, I would love to see one of these at McKee as well. I think that's a well enough used place that there should be one, but I think that this is a good initial place to try one out and see how it works. And if there's any issues, we can address it at that time. If this works and we saw one at McKee as well or anywhere else, I think at that point it would be appropriate that I would want to find money to set up some sort of replacement fund so that it would be available in the future. As far as supplies, it does need pads every 3 years, batteries every 5 years. I spoke to the pickleball group. They're willing to fundraise to do supply replacements for the device. They had no problem with that. They were talking about fundraising some for this anyways, so they were happy to do that. They were thrilled that this amendment was submitted. And as far as location, I would defer to staff and EMS on the best location in McGaw. If they think that the shelter is the best location, I think that that would probably work fine for everyone. I know there's plenty of other events in McGaw that might make use of this if it were necessary to. So I think that would be fine. So happy to answer questions.
I'll make a quick comment. I do like this idea. Having AEDs saves people's lives, and we have a really high. I remember the chief of the EMS told us once that like Dane County has something like a crazy 25% survival rate for cardiac arrest, which is insane. Like normal cardiac survival rates is like 2 to 5%, but it's so high because so many people are trained with CPR and there's so many AEDs that like we're actually able to save people's lives at a higher rate in Dane County, which is wild. So anyway, it's good to have more around. I will say that if the pickleball community is excited about this, there are grant programs to get AEDs. I fundraise for a living, and Habitat got a grant from Firehouse Subs for AEDs. Anyone can apply to that, by the way. They do them tons. But so the pickleball community should start by, I would apply to that grant program. I can send them the website and see if we can get these donated outright. I think the city should invest with it if we can't, but I think we should at least try at least one grant application to see if we can get them funded before we spend the money.
Do you know if they do? I know this because this was like an external. Do they? It's like the external ones are a little more expensive to do, like the outdoor ones. I mean, I could look into it. Yeah.
I think they do a little bit of everything.
Okay.
But Habitat got 6 of them, so they were quite good. And we have a firehouse just outside the city limits. So yeah, Bill.
Okay, so you said you got 6. That's probably for the devices themselves, right? No cabinetry or anything?
It includes the cabinets.
It does?
Yeah.
Wow.
But most of them are portable because they're on build sites.
Okay.
Yeah, that grant program is great. So anyone that's out there and wants safety equipment, look into Firehouse Subs. They do a lot of public safety, first responder equipment. So.
Yeah, I guess just other thoughts, per the staff memo, if we do this for McGaw, how many other places are we going to have to do it? And, maybe we can just put a policy in place that says this is a pilot, right? Or maybe we say at all of our community parks inside a shelter. So that would limit it as well, right, to a relatively small number. And those are, potentially the parks with the highest use anyway, then it would do the most good there.
Yeah, I mean, I very much see this as a pilot to start, because there could be, security concerns too with, kids or whatever. And so we can see how it goes and how that works and make adjustments if we need to.
About, you mentioned here, Chad, to put in a cover shelter. So inside I imagine McKee Farm Park inside the shelter. So what happens if we don't have access to get inside to pick up the?
So it would be still accessible and placed in a position on the shelter where it still may be covered, but it would still be publicly accessible and ideally in a location that would be visible. Or we could explore potentially adding some signage, that might draw a little bit of attention, say, AED in shelter or something along those lines. Yeah.
But are you open to have this mica in the covered shelter?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. Yeah, I think wherever it makes sense for the whole park. I mean, the covered shelter is. I mean, if you would be running. It's a 1 minute run, I think, from the pickleball courts if you were to get there. So yeah, and there are other athletic fields on the other side of that shelter, so that's a pretty central location.
Do you know if other municipality like Madison, San Prairie, or Verona, do they have this in some other park? Have you?
I don't think Verona does. I am not sure about Mass. I mean, I know around the.
You want this one?
Adam's done some research.
Thank you. So Cottage Grove actually has them. They bought them with their ARPA money they had as part of that program. Verona, and I can pull up the email from Chief Anderson, but I believe some of the nonprofit, like the baseball teams, have bought them for themselves, and the EMS has done the training for those groups. But those groups actually own them, and they bring them to their practices or tournament games in a bag, and then when they leave, they take them with them. So I'm aware of those, at least for those communities. Sun Prairie has one that was donated by their pickleball courts, different brand, different kind of type. But it's the challenge with these is when they're outside like this, it has to be in an actual temperature controlled box, unlike the one you have in the hallway. You have the boxes in the hallway here. This actually has to have temperature controls on it because it's out in the elements, whether warm or cold.
Oh, interesting.
Other comments? Logan.
I'll just add real quick. The climate controlling is necessary for battery preservation and then also preservation of the pad quality. So like, for instance, when the police department first got the AEDs, we put those in hard cases, and those were brought in during the wintertime and summertime during extreme weather to try to keep them as climate controlled as possible instead of just leaving them in the trunk of a squad car, for instance, and then being exposed to those temperature extremes. So that's why the cost also ends up increasing for those particular cases.
I wonder, does everyone ever bring those AEDs out in from the outside during the winter months, since there's far fewer people utilizing our parks in the winter months? I know that's not a perfect solution, but
no, we've talked about that internally as well. I mean, if they're mounted someplace, do we bring them inside in the winter? And we haven't gotten that far in the conversation. I think it's a valid question.
Yeah,
just
there's
because
not very much pickleball, I would think, when it's
Because you
negative
close
20.
it.
There's less wear and tear on it potentially as well too. I haven't had that conversation with Chief Anderson yet, but we've kind of talked a little bit internally of maybe we do that as well.
Logan, sorry.
No worries. That was the one question I had was about the weather and the elements. So that answered the one question I had. I did want to kind of offer a thought on what you just mentioned, Alder Gerhardt. My thought about if we have to bring it inside in the winter, do we then need to take down the signage? Because if somebody is in the park and they see a sign that says AED here, and then they run across there and there's nothing, we've kind of promised and under-delivered a life-saving piece of equipment. So that would be my hesitation with that, or at least something that would warrant further exploration. I feel like I'm kind of over $3,000 getting kind of nitpicky about it, but I'm like, I feel like this is a project that absolutely could be fundraised, especially since, we just had the lengthy conversation about the lights at the new pickleball courts at a cost of 10, 11 times this. And B, we also have the Friends of the Fitchburg Parks getting their legs out, kind of underneath them and getting their maneuvering to become, a fundraising and community serving organization. I feel like this would be a good project to get started, get our feet wet, and see what folks outside of City Hall can do, given that it's such a low cost. And then if Firehouse Subs or whomever, the pickleball group, Kappa or whomever, aren't able to do that, then we could have that conversation. But I do want to say I appreciate bringing it forward, and I like the idea of when we decide which parks. I like if there's a shelter here or an indoor serving shelter, that's how we kind of determine where they are, so they're not going to be at every park, because that's just not realistic when we have something like 90 something parks, natural areas, grassy lots that are that kind of thing. So
Yeah, I wonder if we should put a stipulation that just says that we should require an attempt at grant funding before we use city funds, but that's for discussion at another day. Oh, I'm sorry, Dave, go ahead.
I just want to add, this location, you heard them. If you go there on Friday night, there's people older than me playing, which is saying a lot. There, there's a younger crowd, but it's a senior, and having one there, that's the right. If we were going to have one, that's the place to have it.
Yeah, but my only comment would be, I don't want to get into the idea that says we gave you lights, so now you have to fundraise for your life-saving equipment. I think if we can find a grant for it, I think that's fine, and I think that we should do that because that makes total sense. I just think our charge as a city, our number one charge is public safety, and so I think if we're going to spend $3,000 from the TID closure fund, I think this is a good use of that for a public safety purpose. So that's.
Oh, go ahead.
Do we have any information on response time to McGaw, or our fixed locations within the city that might be kind of some of the top callers?
It would be somewhat challenging to capture that. I mean, obviously, if, for instance, an ambulance was responding from Fire Station 3, that would be one way to identify at least a response time there. But the variables that come into play is whether or not the ambulance is on another call or returning from, a run to the emergency room and therefore responding from a little bit of ways away. Where might a fire engine or a police car be when the time of the call comes in? That could, vary introduce variables into those response times. So I don't think it would be all that concrete, if you will. Sure.
It's within the, I think it was the 4.5 minute, the National Fire Protection, when we did our fire station siting, we drew these curves, where that time distance, and again, as Chad mentions, it's dependent on traffic and things, but it fits within our standard acceptable response within our city's urban service territory, which I think is 4 minutes or 4.5 minutes.
Other comments or questions? I just sent the grant program to everybody.
Thank you.
The city may want to be involved in getting a quote, we knew we were having them ask for what we actually need.
So this is my question for Missy. Are we able to amend to say conditional upon trying this grant approval first?
So definitely not tonight, but you could always give direction to staff kind of informally. I'm sure Chad and Adam would be more than happy to pursue grant opportunities that exist, but.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we heard that this evening, and I suspect that the Common Council would be fine if city staff did a little bit of exploratory research or if we saw a grant that fit this sort of fit the criteria for that we could throw an application together and put it in.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right. We are wrapped on discussion for amendment number 2. Next is amendment number 3. Which is proposed by Alders Maldonado and Dantzler Jr. at a Fitchburg Youth Commission, and I believe we'll start with Alder Maldonado's video since he's unable to join us tonight.
Greetings, Mayor, Council, and staff. I am here via video. I can't attend today's meeting, but I did want to talk to you a little bit about the amendments that I put forth. This is going to be one continuous video. So Scott, I just ask that you pause when I give the indication that I'm at the end of one of the amendments. So I'll try to keep it brief, but I want to be detailed. And I'm going to talk to you about first the Youth Commission Amendment and second the Alder Blog Amendment. So I'll start with the Youth Commission Amendment. So I shared an amendment. You've all read it. You have it in front of you that would establish a youth commission in the city of Fitchburg. As listed in the amendment, this would be a 9-person commission that's made up of 5 youth, 4 adults. 3 of those youth will be a designated spot from each of our 3 school districts. The other 2 will be at-large seats. And by youth, my definition is between 14 and 22 years old. So young adults can also be included in the definition of youth. So if we have a college student or somebody that's out of high school, that would be considered a youth member. The purpose of this commission is stated in the amendment, but primarily it's to ensure the inclusion of youth voice in some of our city decisions, including amenities, departments that directly impact them. Also, another purpose is to help steer the direction of the North Fitch-Hatchery Hub and the Teen Center, as well as the work of some of our parks and other departments. Another purpose is to give youth exposure to government, particularly elected positions, committee and commissions, and careers in our local government. So I wanted to address a couple of the items in the staff memo. And again, I'll try to be as brief as possible, but concise. Just keep in mind that in all of these comments, I don't have all the answers. I know there's a lot of details that are, a part of making this decision, and this is something very new for the city. However, there is precedent in other municipalities in doing this work. Dane County is one. The city of St. Paul is one as well. So I included links in the amendment. So if you'd like to do a little bit more research on these, you can. I did have a lengthy discussion with staff from the city of St. Paul. They're obviously a bigger city and much more built out. So I don't expect us to be able to implement the things that they implemented, but I think their work can give us guidance on how to get this project started. So first off, I'm going to address the issue of stipends. So as you know, the city of Fitchburg includes $25 stipends per meeting for members of committees and commissions. I am arguing in favor of a commission rather than an ad hoc committee because of the ability to pay youth for their time. There is a note in the memo that says that the costs of meals and transportation that I've included in the amendment are duplicative due to the $25 per meeting stipend for committee members. For a few reasons, I'd like to challenge this. One, our city hall is not easily accessible by transit for most parts of the city. Most young people do not have reliable access to their own personal vehicles, or they're much less likely than adults to have that. So in this case, rideshare would be a viable option to be able to get young people to and from meetings. I just did a quick search on my phone for what a ride would cost from my house to City Hall, and the cost would be about $12 per way, which would pretty much eat up that $25 ride share. I also want to note that if we were to have youth commission meetings, they would likely take place in the evening. So there would be a importance in feeding young people. Most research shows that, in order to have events, participation, civic engagement from young people, 2 things are important. 1, to pay them for their time. 2, to provide them transportation and have food available. With, rideshare pretty much eating up a $25 per meeting cost, there wouldn't be any room to be able to pay youth nor to feed youth. I'm arguing that all 3 things are important. Young people would be serving on a commission at a time than when they may be normally working. So a stipend going above and beyond these meal and transportation costs would not make membership to a commission a financial choice that is at odds with, say, working at PDQ or Quick Trip or Culver's or something else. I think it's important that, we're getting young people's expertise, their advice, their perspective, that we pay them because youth are underrepresented in the decisions that we make as a city. And this would show our commitment to equity. There is a precedent for other youth commissions being paid. The city of St. Paul, for example, does pay their youth commissioners and provides meals and stipends. And that while it is reasonable for the city to be concerned with setting a precedent for other commissions by providing meals and transportation, young people on the whole have increased barriers to participation that adults may not, particularly having less freedom of movement, having a very clear commitment during the day for school and potentially after school activities, and also again having transportation barriers that are more likely to occur than in adults. While it may be worth discussing whether other committees should do this to advance equity, that's not the purpose of this particular amendment and structure. And again, I'm arguing that youth have different circumstances than adults do on the whole. I'd like to speak to the idea of legal liability. This is something I'm less clear on the answers for. I did have conversations with some colleagues that have talked about rideshare. I think that the best thing to do, apart from kind of seeking legal guidance in this matter, would be to clearly state, if we were to offer ride shares, that the city would provide potentially vouchers for youth, but that their guardians are ultimately responsible for their care as they go back and forth between city meetings. I think a possibility is to maybe create an Uber business account, or to potentially have teen Uber accounts or Lyft accounts. I know the administrative burden around rideshare and food may be a concern as well. And I just want to state that I would recommend that the meals provided for meetings be family style, i.e., providing several pizzas, having a taco bar or something like that, rather than purchasing individual meals, so that we don't have to be dependent on kind of who's there, and thinking about the idea of reimbursements. Again, I think rideshare vouchers would be ideal. In other words, having some sort of account in which we can control the destinations of where youth come from and go, and maybe stipulate that they only be used by youth that need them, and they only be used during and leading up to the times of meetings, to kind of limit the administrative burden that would be placed on staff. Again, I don't have all the answers to this, but I think this is something that would be worth exploring. I'd like to speak to staff capacity. So this amendment, if passed, would begin the process of developing a youth commission. Part of this process would be finding the appropriate staff member to lead the commission. There is a staff member who had expressed interest in serving. Their supervisor also expressed interest in them serving in this role with some caveats. So I would say that we should explore the capacity of that staff member. And if for some reason that is not possible, potentially look at other staff members who may have that interest. And I would really, just open it up to that staff member for their own discretion, rather than us dictating what that capacity may be. As far as an ad hoc commission, my understanding is that an ad hoc commission members are not paid for their work. If there's some way around that, and allowing us to be able to pay our youth members, I would be in favor of an ad hoc commission. I don't think our meetings necessarily would need to be recorded. But again, I don't want to speak to what's possible within this legal structure. I would just say my non-negotiable is to have a structure in which youth are paid for their participation. I'm standing on that as a principle of a youth commission, that we need to pay young people for their time to be able to serve on these commissions, to be able to eliminate barriers and increase equity. I'd like to speak to the idea of youth serving on other commissions. While there is value in young people serving on other commissions and committees, the heart of this particular amendment is to create a body in which young people compose the majority of members. A majority youth board will elevate the voices of youth and center them in the decision-making processes rather than having them serve as a 1 or 2 person member of a majority adult board. I don't know if you all remember being a young person, but it is intimidating. Serving on boards and committees and commissions in and of themselves are pretty intimidating because you're stepping on to a group of people who have experience there, who may be speaking in jargon rather than plain language. And for 1 young person or even 2 young people to sit on a majority adult board is very intimidating and won't necessarily bring out youth voice in the way that a majority youth board would do. The heart of this amendment is to create a majority youth board. Having young people with one another as a group, having peer support, providing them a sense of comfort in sharing their perspectives and empowering them to ask questions more freely. The last thing I would like to speak to is the idea of a structural deficit. So allowing for this year to be a pilot year for the Youth Commission will allow the council to determine its effectiveness and determine whether it is a worthy item for the following year's budget. This is a small budget item. It's a really small expense, and I think really the heart of structural deficits are to speak to larger scale costs, such as the cost of a staff member for a year and having to lay them off the following year because we don't have the ongoing budget for them. I think if we're talking about a youth commission in which young people serve for a year or even serve for multiple years, it's not going to be as big of an impact to be able to lose a youth commission in future years. That's not my hope. However, it's much less of a devastating thing than to lose an essential service or an essential person. So I would argue, because this is a small expense, that we can decide as a council if in 2027 we want to make this a part of our permanent budget. But I'm not as concerned with the structural deficit, sorry, Misty, that maybe, our staff may be. I think this is a different type of a circumstance. I'm going to pause there. Let Scott hit pause before going on to my next amendment. And I will let Alder Dantzler field any questions. I will be listening for the discussion that's going to take place on this amendment. I'll pause here.
Alder Dantzler, would you like to comment first?
Greetings, Mayor, Council, and staff.
First off, happy birthday, Alder Maldonado. But no, I really just signed on to this. As folks know, I've been working in education, and it's one of the things that platforms that I ran on, and I just believe youth are really the backbone of our democracy and the future leaders. And I think programs that we already do, for example, like the mayor having an intern, we having Youth Government Week. I adopted a classroom. The mayor, Chad, I don't know if Adam came to the Oregon classroom, and we did they had a civics lesson, and they wanted to engage with real city people, and they didn't get a chance to paint the sidewalk, but or a crosswalk, but they got a chance to watch our city staff paint the crosswalk, and I can't tell you how elated they were just to sit on the curb and watch because they felt they really, wrote letters to us. And I actually framed mine in my office. They wrote letters to Julia and myself about kind of what they wanted to do. Mayor ratified and myself around what they wanted to do. And I think it was very cool to have them to be able to engage in that process. And I think something like this furthers those opportunities for education, participation, and also camaraderie, and beginning to build a network for those young people to be able to participate at such an early age in some of the democratic processes and be able to, may not fully understand what's going on, especially at a national level or at the city level, but begin to start having those conversations or at least being around them or being exposed to them. And I think having their voice heard in a commission like this, where if not all of their ideas may not move through, but you see the adults engaging with them on some of the stuff that we do. And I think that was important to me and why I decided to join on this amendment with Alder Maldonado.
Thanks. I I know the staff memo is pretty clear, but Chad, anything you want to add from a staff perspective?
No, I think to your point, the memo, we tried to summarize the considerations for the Common Council. I think if this does move forward, the logistics of it all will need to be worked out. I think from a staff perspective, we tried to identify some considerations that the Common Council should be aware of that we'll need to work through. And we also wanted to offer some suggestions on alternatives in order to incorporate youth and or reduce the impact on staff, recognizing capacity is going to be an issue for the foreseeable future. And I will just add that because of staff capacity doesn't mean we can't do something new. It just means that we have to reprioritize what we are currently doing, and that means that something else may not be done or done to the level that it is currently being done. One of the things that was listed in the memo that Alder Maldonado did not mention was potential consideration for consolidation of committees and commissions. We do have 24 of them currently, and obviously each of those has staff impacts. So perhaps, one way to address the staff capacity side of things would be to consider consolidation where appropriate.
Open to discussion. Anyone would like to say anything there? Bill?
Yeah, I would just like to say that I've taken part in some of the youth government programs, and the kids just have this out of the box thinking that's very refreshing and often insightful. So I think having a youth commission would be very valuable for our city. I, like the song says, I too believe that the children are the future. Whatever decisions we make, they are the ones who have to live with it for far longer than we do. So I think it's a good idea to get some insight and opinion from the youth before we, or I guess as input to neighborhood plans, transportation networks, what parks, yes, any number of things, big ticket items, things that we're going to build now and are going to be kind of set in stone for a generation or more that they're going to have to live with. So getting their opinion up front is very important.
Go ahead, Logan.
Logan?
I also like this idea for several reasons. One of them being with the 3 different school districts, anything we can do to bring youth and bring really anyone from different parts of the city, different backgrounds together, I think will help build a stronger citizenry and base of the future, so that when I'm retired, I know who's sitting in this seat will be well equipped to tackle the issues of the day. I also I have a couple concerns, primarily about the above and beyond stipends or any sort of compensation above and beyond what the other committees and commissions have. I think to Alder Maldonado's point about transportation, that's one of the reasons we're spending as much as we are on increasing the 65 and 75 to all-day bus service. So there would be those options to get to City Hall. And from my conversation with him as well, the meetings themselves could also be set up in such a way that they could move around the city to different parts. So again, having that robust transportation network would be important for that lens. I also think with Zoom, everybody's, pretty well comfortable. We still have the, is my mic on moment. But other than that, I think if there's an issue with folks getting here, I think that would still be a reasonable alternative, would be that virtual participation. The other thing that I think that Chad, that you mentioned, and I would certainly be all for, would be reevaluating whether we have the best committee and commission structure currently. And that's far and above beyond what this amendment gets into. But from a community understanding standpoint, to go back to some of the communication things we were talking about earlier, it's not easy to track that, okay, well, this development that I'm opposed to or that I support, or this project is going to Bike and Ped, and then it's going to TTC, and then it's going to Board of Public Works, and then Board of Public Works offered an amendment, and it just creates this hurdle for folks to follow along and be part of the process and active citizens. And then from the development side of the world, it slows down and just adds more hurdles to some of the processes that it requires to go through all these steps. I think of in Madison, the Urban Design Commission and the Plan Commission, and isn't there an architectural or a landmarks that's pretty active too? So it adds more time and more staff involvement, which if we could consolidate some of that, I could imagine it helping to free up staff capacity. I would also just say, I think from my conversations with Alder Maldonado, that I don't think staff capacity would be an issue with this based on his telling of it. And I would absolutely like to see this go forward, even if it is a one-year program that we have to reevaluate long-term sustainable funding for down the road. Even if it is only 1 year, I think there's enough that we could get out of this, whether it's insights on the importance of the teen center that's been long discussed, or some of the planning things, our parks. We have enough plans that are going through that I think there could, even if this only exists for 1 year, I think there's still value in pursuing it and finding a way to make it work.
Dave, did you want to talk?
Yeah. I think this surprised most of you. I had some very positive youth government things growing up. Our freshman year in high school, we had city government day at the county and went through mock trials things. And as someone that came from a poor family, I was very honored to be selected to attend Badger Boys State, where we learned much about government. I think this probably comes as a surprise to you. I think most of you think I attended Genghis Khan High School, but here's my view. I think this is a good idea, but this is what I would like to say is we have enough commissions. Attach it to, I think, having it be attached to the equity committee would be a good place. Second, fundraise for this, fundraise. And the virtual, we have a number of alders that, due to circumstances, attend meetings virtually. All the kids have a iPad from the school. So I don't put this on the taxpayer. We should be able to fundraise. I'll write a check, not for the whole thing, but I'll write a check to help with it. But then for a year, then you can see where it goes. But don't put this on the taxpayer. And I'm not up for election this spring. There's still plenty of mad people out there, and I would like to see this move forward, but not on the back of the taxpayers. That's all.
Mayor?
Yes, so one of the things I want, Misty, first of all, in the column of the mayor per diems, $1,680, did you include there the 9 people or only the youth people, the young people?
So the current city per diem policy would apply to every member of an established committee commission at that $25 and $35 rate. So it would include everybody. I costed it based on current policy.
Okay. So it's okay. So my comments about this is that I think this is a good idea. We have heard for a couple of years that even some people approach us and say it would be nice how to incorporate the young people in your process. I think we can do a pilot program first to determine if like we did with the Community and Equity Advisory Committee, to determine if this is a viable option for the future. And so if we do a pilot program, we can we don't need to have FACTv. We can rotate, the meetings. There are only 4 meetings in a year. They can rotate having those meetings in one district, in one shelter. We have the hub. We can have the, Hewell Jamestown shelter, McKee. We can rotate those meetings. My only concern is that some of the kids, what happens if they don't have transportation, how they can come to the meeting. So this is what the right, or to have like a stipend for transportation, it will be, necessary. And I agree with Dave that I think we can fundraise this money, and all of us, we can chip, some money from our, own funding. But also we need to remind it that, we don't have our own school district. We have 3 school districts. And this is a great opportunity to bring some sense of community, bringing kids from the different school districts to work together, This is what I see like this is a great idea. And also in a $42 million budget, even if we had to find this money in our budget, what is that dent when we're trying to do something for the greater good here? You know what I mean? So I understand, Dave, that you said, I agree with you, that we should fundraise the money, we should find the money, and I think it's only, if we don't, I think we need to provide a stipend to the kids. I agree that maybe with some pizza, whatever that, the cost could be less than $2,600. But also in the case that we had to put in the tax levy, this is, what is the dent that it does to our budget? You know what I mean? And what are the benefits and the cost? I think this is a nice, neat program that we need to give it a try. You know what I mean? And, for a year, and it doesn't work, we not move along in the 2027 budget with this. But I don't know. I think this is it can create some sense of community, bringing together kids from the different school districts, and engage them in, in some activity that, I can see that they can be helping us with parks, activity, moving the parks. We are not doing those things anymore like we used to do. They can help us to do that in different parks in the city in the summer. I don't know. There are a lot of opportunity and potential, but that's it.
Could I just say one more thing, Council President?
Please.
So Alder Herbst, yes, I agree. Like I don't think Alder Maldonado was against the fundraising opportunity either. So I definitely am open to that. The one thing I did want to speak to was just the comment about like potentially adding this to the Community Equity Committee. The reason why I wouldn't do that now is because like I really want youth to be more protected, and given the current landscape in our country with some of the conversations that may happen in that committee about some of the things that we may do, I don't think youth are ready to engage in some of that stuff just yet. And I would want them to have more fun. And if you've seen any of our community equity meetings, sometimes there's very like difficult conversations being had in those things about some of the things like the decisions that we need to make or language that needs to be adjusted and everything like that. So Alder Maldonado and I talked about really keeping this space like youth friendly. And while we won't, they don't take every single idea that they have, but I think involving them somewhat in the process and keeping it light and getting them interested, I think was the purpose of this, more so than diving into kind of some of the seriousness that has been surrounded by like the equity work and the seriousness and people being impacted by what's going on in this country. So that was the reason for not attaching it to a committee like that one.
I see your point there. My thought was, though, they would report, they wouldn't necessarily, say they would report to that committee, then they'd have their meeting, and then they would come, and the first thing they would, they'd report to them, this is what we did, this is what we're thinking about. So I see totally what you're saying, but I think that a reporting to and not attending those meetings would be a good option.
A few thoughts from me. Being involved in government as a young person is very important. Dave, I did Virginia Girls State when I lived in Virginia. It was very influential on me. I was invited to the what do you call it? The county supervisor, the meeting when I got my gold award as a Girl Scout. And with my Girl Scouts, I encouraged them to go to the Verona City Council meeting and talk about their Bronze Award project, because I think that's a really formative thing that happens for young people when they have an opportunity to be a part or even just be around local government. And I don't know for sure if I would be sitting here if I didn't have those experiences. So, and I think the youth government days that we've done the youth government week, over the last couple of years have been wonderful. And I think this is a really nice follow-up to that, where we make it more formal in a way and try to engage the youth in the actual issues of the city and get their feedback in a more formal way. I think that's a beautiful thing. I think it's something we can explore. I'm totally open to the idea of fundraising for it. I'd be happy to write a check for this. I think I do worry. The staff capacity issue, I don't take that lightly. I think that's a concern. The staff has a lot to do. And so it sounds like there might be a staff member, I don't know the details, that's excited about this. I think somebody needs to be excited about making this possible, and their supervisor needs to be on board with having them spend the time to do that. But I hope that if we can get the logistics figured out, that this is something that's feasible, and that we can get the logistics sorted out. But I think it's a beautiful idea, and excited to see how we can make this happen. Mayor? Did you want to say something?
Yeah, no, this is for Chad and Adam. You mentioned about maybe we need to reconsider. I didn't know that we had 24 boards. I never counted. So, but it's like, wow. So maybe something that we can have another discussion another time is how we can envision to reduce the number of boards, and how to combine some of the board. I don't know. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so the 24 was just what I counted off the website. So there's obviously some overlap with committee of the whole and whatnot. I think the challenge here too is, I'll use myself as an example. I'm filling in right now for parks. If a project goes to parks, it goes to parks, it goes to Board of Public Works, it goes to finance, it goes to council. That's the staff capacity issue, is once you add a different committee into that, quite honestly, I got 3 kids at home. They're at home right now alone because my wife had something else going on tonight because I had to be here. So that's the issue from the staff side as well, is personally, when you start adding these additional committees and commissions in, we can make them work. It's just there's also shuffling that goes on behind the scenes, that now you've got our projects that got to go to our committee, or if it ends up going to a different one that wasn't expected, it creates that issue behind the scene from a staff capacity. So it's the meeting itself, but quite honestly, for me personally, I'll be honest with you, and probably others here at the city, it's the personal side that really kills you. It's just you get these additional meetings, and it creates a struggle. It does at times. So I think there needs to be a holistic conversation, because you've got projects that, I think whoever said it, are rolling through 5-6 different committees, and at some point you got to ask the question: are you getting value on that or not? And if you're not getting value, staff's not going to say keep them, but it's the personal side of that too from staff. Just like I said, speaking personally, it can create challenges that.
But you know what? I agree, but I have that conversation with Chad. Sometimes I say, do we need to send this to all of these committees? You know what I mean? And then the question is about transparency too, because, you know what I mean?
Yeah, but tonight on this one alone, I heard parks, I heard a whole bunch of ideas. So then you've got a parks director, you've got potentially whoever else is going to have to report there. I get that 100%. Mm-hmm. Please don't lose sight of the fact when I say staff capacity. We can do it. It's the capacity side of what's not going to get done. But please also just don't forget the personal element of our personal lives as well too, of what we shuffle and what we move around. And if the committee meeting, and honestly, some of these meetings go quite long. So that's the other challenge as well too. So I just would encourage you, as you can consider other committees and commissions. And obviously I'm passionate about this because part of the reason I'm in Fitchburg is because I have better work-life balance. I don't want to go back to what I had, and that's why I'm just, as you think about these as well, please consider that. I'm just from.
And I'm glad you brought that up, and I didn't want to make it, or I didn't want the amendment to come across like it's, and I'm not saying you said this, but like we're definitely cognizant of like what folks are doing. And I was just wondering, do we have to have like staff involved? And I'm not trying to like cut them out of the process, but like if this is something that can be ran by the people who introduced it, can that work?
So because it would be a city meeting, it needs to be agended. And minutes need to be taken. And typically, city staff has obviously helped facilitate those things happening. So while that could be evaluated where, maybe there could be less involvement from staff, I think at the end of the day, staff is still going to need to touch any committee or commission because of the fact that it's a public meeting. It has to be agended. Meetings have to be taken. And somebody from a staff perspective has to coordinate with the committee chair.
But it's a pilot, like an ad hoc. Do we need to do all this formal process? Can we,
Well, it still would need to be agended for sure and posted. And I would also have minutes taken minimally from a transparency standpoint.
And there could be another option that we can do this more like call it different, like an ad hoc academy or whatever. So we don't, we don't have to have agendas and all of that. More like a program, you know what I mean?
Because and I think to the mayor's point, Chad, like again, I'm not trying to remove stuff. I just I don't want to be the person who brought an amendment that's making more work for people and then like take my hands back like, well, you all go figure it out. We show up at the meeting. Because that's not really what I wanted. Like, I really want to be involved in this as it was something brought up. So if like council or the people who champion this idea can bear the burden of like making it happen, I would love to do that. And like the mayor was saying, I think this one, unlike the Community Equity Committee, where that was like more like adults and my serious topic, I think this one is really just creating a space for you to engage in these type of governmental topics. So if it can be done, I guess, less structurally or something like that, I was open to like hearing those options, because that's something Alder Maldonado and I talked about as well.
Well, I think one of the big questions that would need to be answered, and this would be needed through ongoing conversation, is what do we see as the goal and objective and the format, most importantly, on obtaining or reaching the goal and objective. And as Mayor Radafrada just mentioned, maybe there's a different approach than an actual committee. Maybe it's something else. We would ultimately need to take a look at this and probably try to come up with options for the Common Council to consider if this is something you wanted to press on with.
Logan.
I'll keep it to 10 seconds, I promise. I was just going to say, with some of the reorganization that's happening at City Hall, I think that reassessing some of the committees and commissions, this could also be an opportune time for that as well, since there's some shifting winds and shifting. I think that's my 10 seconds.
Two small thoughts from me. Number one, I think the length of meetings is also something that should be.
Yeah.
Because I think some meetings don't need to go as long as they need to go. I am cognizant of that as my role here, so hi. I'm also at fault in some ways. But sometimes the council discussions, it's like we're trying to decide these major things for the city. We have to have longer discussions. But some committees I've been in, and I'm like, this meeting doesn't need to be 3 hours long. This meeting could be an hour and a half. And we just, if the conversation isn't complete by then you put it on the next agenda. So anyway, that's one thing we should think about. Second, the Youth Commission, I personally think that having it in person would be good. I forgot to say that before, but virtual is okay, but I think there's something different about having an in-person commission, and I do think it would be good for us to have that, at least in part. Any other final comments?
Good. I'm not opposed to that. I just want to be clear. I just wanted to make those comments because
Absolutely.
I'm going to hear from staff, and I need to pass those along. So I'm not opposed to the idea. It's just that's the bigger conversation if we're having the conversation.
No, and we appreciate it.
I want to mention something that also we need to remember. One of our values as a city is to be innovative. And I think this one is something innovative that we're trying to do, and we need to embrace it with that. Yeah, it has to challenge it, but I think how we can make it happen like it doesn't have too much effect in the staff capacity. You know what I mean? Or how we can help. You know what I mean? Too, as as an elected official. You know what I mean? I don't know.
All right, I think that's the end of the discussion for amendment number 3. So we can move on to our final Alder proposed amendment, amendment number 4. Oh, yeah, thanks, Dave. This is proposed by Alder Maldonado with me as a co-sponsor. Add Alder blogs, and I think we'll start with Joe's video.
Speak to the other amendment that I put forth, which is the idea of adding Alder blogs. So the reason I'm introducing this, there are several reasons. I've wanted to do this for a while, but I'm finally getting around to proposing it. When I first took council, a previous alder had given me an email list of probably about 2,000 people that lived in my district. What I would do when I set up this alder blog, or what I would do when I wanted to alert constituents of certain things, is I would copy and paste the entire email list. I would send out multiple emails because Microsoft only lets you send 500 at a time. I would get them all ready, write what I want to write, whether it be city updates, different things coming up or in my district, or votes that are coming up, policies that are coming up. I would put them all in separate emails, put my list together, and then hit send at the same time. I'd probably get close to 300 bounce backs. I'd get several people saying that they'd like to be removed because they've moved. And I would kind of go through the manual task of doing this probably once a month. I haven't had a chance to do this in quite a few years. It is pretty tedious work, but I do notice there are several alders who have utilized Constant Contact and paid for a subscription to be able to manage this list. And I know there's some alders that may not send out anything at all or never have. I think there is a need for some sense of uniformity and consistency in how we're messaging, and I think there should be some infrastructure for that, so that new people joining council don't necessarily have to figure things out, because I feel like it's sort of a wild west in terms of how our council members communicate, because we don't necessarily have any formal guidance for this. So I've looked to our neighbor, the city of Madison. I included a link to our an alder blog that was sent out in District 11. I just picked a random district. As you'll see, there's the capacity and the capability for alders to be able to make entries. I believe there's an opt-in, opt-out system, so constituents can choose to subscribe to these blogs. And I believe notifications go out from alders, but I'm not completely sure. I haven't dug into that. I think this amendment does several things. One, it allows for some pretty inexpensive communication. From what I understand, there's no cost to this. I did add $100 just so that we can get this into discussion. But really there's, from what I understand, no kind of fiscal cost to this work. I'm opening this up as a discussion so that we as a council can kind of decide whether to direct staff to do this work. I think it's important that we have a template of information that we can send out from us that goes to our constituents. I've often heard the mayor say, I've also heard, some staff say that it would be helpful for folks to be able to hear city messages directly from their representatives. And if information is already going out about road closures, about openings of buildings, about new events, about openings of businesses in our district or citywide, that we have a template to be able to take that information, copy it, paste it onto our blogs, have notifications be able to go out, and then add whatever individual touches that we want to, whether it be our neighborhood association doing something or some sort of event going on around us or some sort of opportunity that's going up. I want to be clear that this is not intended to share partisan information. We're not sending information about the Dane County GOP or the Dane Dems meetings that are coming up. We're not sending out information about electing our state representatives or our Congress people. We're not necessarily making commentary on, what we think about a particular party. And we're also not using this information to promote our own campaigns. And I want to speak specifically to the staff memo, which speaks to the 50-piece rule. Now, I did read through the guidance. I Googled 50-piece rule and looked through it. My understanding from looking through the 50-piece rule is that it is really a rule that is intended to speak to campaign-related material. There's very explicit language that speaks to campaign seasons, and I would also venture to say this is the heart of this rule is speaking to alders or local elected officials essentially using city resources to promote their own elections and campaigns. That is not the spirit of any communication that I've ever sent out, nor the part of any information I've ever seen any of my fellow council members send out. We're using this to directly communicate about city business, about city events, about things that are going on that relate to the city of Fitchburg. If we need to specifically speak to the time in which alders are up for election, particularly contested elections, I'm willing to concede that. Perhaps we publish blogs but don't send notifications out during the period between early January and the first Tuesday in April when we have a contested race. But I don't believe that this particular 50-piece rule applies to us. And again, we've already got a city that's been doing this for years quite effectively. And it's a really clear way for council members to be able to have a very clear platform to be able to send out information to their constituents. We use email for this purpose. We use our city council meetings for this purpose. We have district events for this purpose. And in all cases, we are using city resources to communicate with much more than 50 people. I don't think that this rule applies. I understand the reticence of the staff to want to make sure that we're being safe and we're not violating any ethics. But I firmly believe that this is not a violation of ethics in the state of Wisconsin. So with that being said, I will open it up to staff for a discussion, and I will let Alder Gearhart field any questions. If there are things that I haven't addressed, I'll be listening to this meeting after it's posted to FACTv. And if amendments are needed to be made on the floor to this amendment, I'm open to those. I think I've clearly stated what my non-negotiables are and what I'm willing to negotiate on. Let's not let kind of bureaucracy and red tape stop us from being able to increase our communication, increase the voice of young people and underrepresented groups in the work that our city does. Thank you very much.
I'll comment first since I signed on a co-sponsor to this amendment. I have also brought this idea up multiple times. I maintain an Alder website. I pay for this website so I can have a blog function, and then I also send out an email list, which I maintain through MailChimp. But I'm currently still in the free version, but I will pass that up soon. And it has always struck me as strange that I have to have completely separate things from the city website. I prefer to drive my constituents to the website whenever I can, and I cannot drive them to anything when I'm trying to interpret something for them or summarize something that I've sat in meetings up for and listened to for hours. I cannot do that through the city website. I have to do that through a private web page that people have no ability to find by going to the city website. So I've had people that are like, oh, you have a newsletter? And I was like, yeah. And they're like, how do I get on that? And I was like, you have to talk to me because there's no way to do it from the city website, which has been a frustration for me for a long time. I think it's not good from a public standpoint. I am making this content, I'm interpreting for people, and people do not have an ability to access that easily. So, and I also think that there's no longevity beyond my term as an alder. You know, when I step away from this position in time, there's no like that list will go away with me, versus if it's a list maintained by the city that's for District 2 Alder updates, that person will get District 2 Alder updates no matter who sits in that seat. And I think that's good for public communication. So I do think this is very important. I appreciate the concern about the 50-piece rule. I read through the opinion that was provided, and I appreciate staff for pulling that opinion from the Wisconsin Ethics Commission. But I think it pretty clearly says that it applies only during a specified period of time where the candidates are actively seeking office. Material is distributed between the point the candidate is nominated until the election. So I think if it's just a blackout period from between those periods when people are running for office, I think that would be absolutely fine to kind of really make sure that we're not above and beyond. But I have read a lot of the communications from my fellow alders, and we are focused on city issues and nothing related to politics at all. It is about communicating with our residents about what's happening in the city. We sit in these meetings, represent them, and I spend many hours of my life understanding these issues so that they don't have to. They shouldn't have to watch all these meetings. I should be able to just summarize that for them and give them the information they need. And I believe that everybody should have access to that service that I provide through the city channels. Any other comments? Bill.
Yeah, I think this is a great idea. I've wanted something like this, I guess, for the 2.5 years I've been on council as well. I didn't inherit any sort of an email list, and
Are you going to give me Will? No?
So it's, and it's not an insignificant amount of work to set up a newsletter, to produce that, just to get the infrastructure in place so that you can create a periodic newsletter. So I really like this idea that especially since we don't yet have any sort of a communications personnel. We discussed earlier this evening how difficult it is to communicate, and this would potentially provide another, hopefully more convenient place for somebody to get kind of a condensed digest of goings on within the city.
Alder Gerhardt said almost everything I was going to say, so I will just plus one to all of that. I also maintain a website with a newsletter, and just for the listening public, the more people who sign up, the more it costs to maintain the infrastructure. So I run it through Squarespace, and it costs more money if there's 2,000 emails on there versus 400. So the more effective this becomes as a tool, the more I'm paying, and it's not an insignificant amount of money to create this tool and this resource for the community. Again, given my professional and background and just general belief in good government, I think it is well worth the cost and then some to do. And to the point about how do people know it exists, I don't want to be spamming every neighborhood Facebook page every month with all these things. I already feel a little bit on edge sometimes doing that, trying to say, hey, here are the 3 things that are coming up in each neighborhood. But finding those resources, unless you know where to look, or you talk to the alder directly, or somebody refers you or forwards it on, if you're already going to the city website, that's the place where folks are already going to sign up for project-specific updates, for commission and committee-specific updates, for council updates, for police news releases, for fire news releases, all these things that we already provide to the community. That infrastructure is already there. It seems like adding a line that's to sign up for District 1 specific updates or District 3 specific updates is a no-brainer, not a significant expense. And to the point of, again, we don't have that communications director role. Here's ways that we as the alders can take on that responsibility and meet that public need in yet another way without putting any burden, or a very minimal burden at that, on the folks who are here in City Hall. So, and I'll also mention I had this exact conversation with Valerie, our city attorney, right after I was elected, and had said the same thing of why does Madison do this? and we can't. And to the point about the 50-piece rule, one thing that's been kicking around in my mind here this evening is if the way Madison's looks like it's structured is there's a lot more staff involvement, maybe there's, instead of a complete like blackout period during a period in which somebody may be up for election, especially a contested election, that could be where city staff are able to maintain that for that short period and still make sure that constituents are getting that information. Looking at the example that was provided in the packet, it's pretty much, hey, here's a list of all the meetings that are happening, and there are projects from District 1 and 3 in the Plan Commission this week. So it's not very detailed, but it still lets people know, hey, there's something there I should pay attention to. And if we're already doing that, we have on the city's social media pages already a weekly rundown of here's all the lists of all the meetings that are coming up this week. It seems like it wouldn't be that much of a significant hurdle to then just copy paste that and take the alder's keys away for that 60-day period or 90-day period between when nomination papers open and when the election occurs.
Jen.
So I will offer the staff perspective on this. And while there may not be a monetary cost to this, there clearly is a staff impact cost to this. And we talked fairly significantly about staff capacity during the last amendment conversation here. And at the end of the day, staff is creating the content that would be available for this. And that is not something that is should be taken lightly. If we're talking about creating blackout periods effectively for 1/3 of the year or 1/4 of the year, who's going to monitor those blackout periods and who they specifically apply to in order to ensure that we're in compliance with the Wisconsin Ethics Commission opinion? And that does require somebody to monitor that. And what do we do if the person who's supposed to be monitoring it has taken vacation that week? Or what if there's a vacancy in that role and it slips through the transition period into somebody else that moves into that role? While this Common Council may be appropriately commenting about things related to their district, what happens if a new alder comes in and doesn't abide by the same principles that this group is abiding by and utilizes their access to the blog to politicize things or make other comments or questionable remarks there? Who's going to be policing that? And who's going to be ensuring that that won't happen? A staff member is going to need to be able to do that and monitor that. And because Madison is doing this, for instance, in violation of a opinion, or at least contrary to an opinion that was offered, does not necessarily mean that the city of Fitchburg should go ahead and engage in it. I think that that's always a problematic position that any one person, any organization should take, that just because somebody else is doing it, that makes it okay for us to do it. So I think that there are a number of concerns from staff perspective on this. I think that we have offered in the memo here that an e-newsletter is forthcoming. We've already been engaged with some staff to get that created. The e-newsletter largely, if not exclusively, would be the content that is produced by staff for something like an Alder blog. And therefore, why not just create the e-newsletter, put a notify me on the city website to be able to sign up to be notified whenever an e-newsletter is posted, or physically enter in your email address to have that e-newsletter automatically emailed to you and is created, is a much cleaner, more efficient way to do it. It does not involve the anticipated and or potential impact on staff. And by and large, I think that is the recommendation that I would make as the city administrator and to the Common Council, that give us an opportunity on the e-newsletter. We can certainly look at making sure that we communicate that far and wide and create opportunities for our community to sign up to be notified when that comes into play, and therefore then eliminates any possibility of ethics commission opinion violation or act contrary to that. It removes staff from being in that uncomfortable position of creating that content, and also removes staff from having to monitor when and who is part of the blackout period, if you will, and eliminates the possibility for future members of Common Council who may not take the same approach that this Common Council takes to providing information and so forth. So that's where I sit from a staff representation perspective on this. I appreciate the reasons why folks would want to do this, and I will also say that I appreciate the lengths with which this Common Council does take to engage with their constituency within each of their districts. I've been with the city quite some time, and obviously in this role, admittedly, I pay much closer attention to the communication efforts of alders than I have in previous roles, but I can say confidently that this group is far and away concerned and takes active efforts to try to communicate to our community and their constituency. And I appreciate that because it does take a team effort. And there are things that we as city staff recognize we can look to improve and enhance from our communication and outreach efforts. And I think the e-newsletter is a good step in that direction. And again, we're looking to get the first one rolled out early next year.
When? January?
I would look at January as the preferred rollout. Absolutely, yes.
So it's going to be a monthly one, isn't it?
We could possibly do that. I think that ideally would make the most sense and provide the most value to our community is to have a monthly newsletter. I think you and I had talked initially that we were talking every other month, but I think that we'll look to focus our efforts on truly trying to create a monthly newsletter that can be shared to help, again, bridge gaps in communication.
So I appreciate the e-newsletter. I think that's great that we're moving towards it. I think it's super important. I will say that I guess I read the opinion, and I do not think that my understanding of when I read it was that there just cannot be communication during that period when the alder is a candidate.
Yeah.
That any other period of time it is fine. Right. And when I talk about a blog, I guess what I mean is I would generate the content. That content would then be submitted to the city. I assume somebody would just read it quickly and it'd be like, okay, post. And I would not be able to, nothing would be posted during that window when I was running for re-election or any alder was running for re-election. That was the idea I had. It would not involve the staff creating content. Obviously, the content that the staff creates is often part of the content that I use when I create a blog because it's based on city content. So it would be like I would be creating the content, any of the other alders would be creating content, submitting it for posting. And the only thing is that just during those windows in time, the 4 alders, any of which are up for re-election, would not be able to post during that period of time. That's my interpretation, and I maybe I'm misunderstanding the opinion, but
no, I agree with you with the opinion. I read it, and it's kind of you had to keep it, So the idea is, Gabriela, that we prepare the content like we always do, and then the only thing that we want is to have like someone. A city hall posted in our page. We have our page and that's it. So that one is what you are intend to do.
That's my intention, yeah. And Alder Maldonado would have to say if he intended something different. But I generate the content for blogs and for email newsletters now. It would just be a matter of it being on a city website. And I don't think I should have the ability to publish something on the city's website.
No.
I think that's a terrible idea for multiple reasons.
But it should be a template.
But
because we need to have like a consistency of because you don't want to see each page of each of us look different. You know what I mean? Like how do you create
But
that?
if it's just a word processor, it's like
no,
I just
know,
am writing a blog
I
post.
for some reason I received, I don't know why I end up in one of these Alder from Madison list. I know I received some of those notifications. So it's plain. It's very simple, you know.
Yeah.
You know. So, yeah. So.
And it would just be a submit a Word document. That's how I envision it.
Yeah.
Submitting a Word document, it's uploaded in the portal, the staff presses send. It would not require, and I understand that that doesn't require no staff time. I sympathize with that. But I'm just saying that, like, I am positioned to communicate to my constituents better than many people. I sit in these meetings. I talk to voters when I'm running for re-election. I talk to voters throughout the time. I have a sense of what's happening in my district. I sit in these meetings and I can interpret things. And I think that what I have to say about things is important for people to hear. They should know where I stand on issues. They should know what is happening in the city. And I think it's a real loss that is not available. And I understand that there's some complexity there. But anyway, just wanted to clarify what I envisioned for that.
Yeah, no, I want to say that I am very, how can I say? I want to say that I'm very, surprised by, your blog. I read your blog. I read your blog too. Micah has a blog. Joe sent something. So we are sending information. I can see that. And the other thing that I want to mention is because I have my newsletter for many, many years. And I use constant contact, and it's becoming expensive because I surpass my, I don't know how many emails, but I really do this because I love and I want to have my constituents informed of what is happening. And I receive a great feedback because people send, thank you for doing that, oh, I didn't know that all these things is happening in the city. So this is what you say, that there is a disconnect sometimes when you send your newsletter and people respond to you and they say, oh, I didn't know about all of this. While there is all this other information, coming from the city. So, and we discussed before that there is a disconnect, how people are reaching out. I don't know. But I think that, I want to thank all of you that are doing this because it takes a lot of time, and hours to put together this and be sure that the links work and that we are using the correct information, be sure that we don't, I try not to comment in any, I would like to do it very neutral. I don't want some time to, this is an information blog. That's it. This is what it is. But yes, I think we are doing this, some of us, this work. But, I don't know. I think that the intent that you have is, I don't know.
I'll also say that, I won't speak for Alder Maldonado, but I understand that this might not happen in January, and maybe it even wouldn't happen this year. But I do think this is an important discussion to have. So I appreciate that this was brought up. And things don't happen immediately, but this has been brought up again and again. Or I've certainly brought it up more than once. But I think it's important to have this discussion. And so I think this is a venue to have that discussion, even if it's not going to happen in 2026.
Yeah. Exactly.
Anyone else?
I will just add that, I appreciate the reasons for why this would be brought up, but even in the scenario that's been offered that an alder would submit to city staff for posting on the city website, I know you recognize that there is a staff person that is going to spend some time doing that. They're going to have to read the post in order to ensure that it's apolitical, if you will, and is an appropriate manner. And then what happens if it's not? Then they're coming to the city administrator to say, Alder so-and-so's blog post has what I believe to be a problem. And then I'm stopping what I'm doing that day to evaluate what the post is, and then having to reach out to the alder and say, I think it's a problem. And then the alder, who may be engaging in that behavior, may not exactly be the most reasonable of individual, and then therefore is creating a bit more work for staff. And then the question would be is, can an alder update as many times as they want in a month? Is it one time a month? There's a whole host of things here. So I really would appreciate, to be honest with you, if you afford staff a one-year opportunity to do this e-newsletter and see how that goes and see what your feedback is from your constituents on our improved efforts.
Give us access to we can publish everything in the website.
We can do it for you,
Let me
Chad.
think about that.
No, I respect that. Thank you. Thank you.
I'm joking, and I'm going to think about it.
Thank you for the perspective, Chad. I appreciate that. It's well taken. It's well taken.
And this, I agree with Gabriela. Even this is a topic to discuss, even though it's not going to get approved. But at least we have to have the discussion and what are the solutions. That's it.
Other comments, Bill?
Yeah, I'm certainly sympathetic to the whole city staff as moderator thing. And you didn't even get into, holy cow, this guy just wrote something that is factually incorrect. And then how do you try and even convince him that it is incorrect? That might be a problem sometimes. I guess, so, if we want to do the city newsletter for a year, will the council be involved in generating that content?
So this is what I would ask, is that let's have staff put this together, and then as it rolls out, I think the feedback will be important from not only the elected official perspective, but what are your constituents saying? Is the information that's in there, is that the type of information that they're looking for, or are they looking for other pieces of information and sharing that with staff? Because it will be an evolution, right? We're already starting to look at what other communities are putting in their e-newsletters, and we'll look to begin to emulate, pieces of them that we're seeing that we feel might be the most beneficial for our community. But again, it's an evolution that is going to require feedback and input for us to over the course of that year to ideally get it into a place where all of us would like to see it, and we feel that it's the most beneficial and making the most impact in our community. So I think once it's implemented, it's likely here to stay. It's just a matter of how does it evolve over time. And I think that, again, giving us that year to get it out there, let it grow, let it evolve, will be critical for this conversation.
Thanks, Chad. All right, I think it's time to move on to the next item, which is our omnibus amendment, adjust transfer out of fund balance to meet ERIP threshold. Misty, would you like to cover this?
Yes, please. So as we've talked about at a variety of different occasions, we have levy limits, which we don't really have a lot of control over, but then there's the expenditure restraint incentive program. That program gives us a financial benefit, an aid payment from the state if we meet certain criteria. I expect we're not going to be eligible for this program for much longer because our tax rate is likely to fall below the $5, which is one of the many steps that are there. But even seeing that, I'd like to still protect the capacity that we currently have in that program. I think it was almost $5 million based on the mayor's budget. So what this amendment does in order to protect that capacity for future years is it moves money out of the general fund into the capital projects fund. It's kind of like moving money from checking to savings. That money that's been transferred over to the capital projects fund the last couple of years we've been doing this is how we've been paying for a lot of those one-time capital projects that we then do the subsequent replacement fund for. So that money has been put to good work, but it's on one-time things and meets the general criteria that Moody's looks at, and as does our financial policies. So this is relatively innocuous if you ask me. It's kind of a housekeeping thing, but it's a way to protect the city and give us more capacity in the future.
And this is something we do every year?
Recently, yes, yeah. Because we've had more capacity than what we've needed.
Great. Questions on this? Bill?
Yeah, so the money that you're moving from the general fund over to capital projects, that's going to reduce the total size of the general fund, which might make it easier to kind of bump up the percentage of unallocated funds within the general fund. On the other hand, if you're only moving unallocated funds, that's going to come down. Are we, how does this affect our policy of having between 15 and 25% unallocated funds?
Yep. So the intention will be that we will budget the amount that we need to protect that capacity, but I will only actually transfer the amount that is in excess of our minimum policy. So I'll have a permission to do the $5 million, whatever it works out to be, but I'll only actually do the amount that at the end of the year that meets that policy. One other thing, if I may, real quick, I also request some flexibility in this amendment, recognizing there's not too much movement this year on things that impact this calculation. I'd still like the flexibility that I could make this number be the number it needs to be to meet the spirit of what we're talking about.
Logan.
I just have one clarifying question. So if and when we no longer become eligible for this expenditure restraint incentive program, what does our financial future, I guess, look like? If you can stare into your misty crystal ball, and should we be preparing for bad things when this is no longer an option for us?
So not necessarily bad things, but I'll say that we've already experienced a pretty rapid decline in what that aid payment has been. So it was at $650,000 just a couple of years ago. This last year, there was a hold harmless provision one year, so we kept that same $650. If that hold harmless provision wouldn't have been in there, it would have dropped to $400. This year, I think we're dropping to like $250. So that amount of money that we are getting from the state is very rapidly declining and will eventually go to zero. So that is a structural deficit that we have, the one big one that I don't like, but it is in the CIP right now. So we're using this one-time fund balance that we've been transferring over. We're using to fill that gap back up to that $650,000 in order to fund our CIP currently. So eventually the money will run out, but at least as of right now, we've got a full 10 years available, so some time to plan for it.
Thank you.
Misty, what do we need to do to increase our mill rate?
Yeah, so that's our big challenge, right? So our equalized value is increasing at a significantly higher pace than what our levy limits allow us to increase property taxes for.
No.
So to increase your mill rate, either the values have to be dropped, which would be pretty devastating for our overall economy. So let's not hope that happens. The other side of the equation would be raising property taxes through whatever means are available to the council is the other way to modify a rate.
So the ERIP money that we get it in a single year and we budget for it the following year. Correct. Is that correct? That's how we've always done it, so that we're not planning for it in the current year.
Yes and no. That's the intention, but because we have a 10-year CIP that assumes that amount for all of those 10 years in order to meet what we project levy limits to be. What you're saying is true from a mechanical perspective, but not necessarily from a planning perspective.
Okay. Questions? Bill?
So for those playing at home, the amount of this payment is scaled based on taking our mill rate and subtracting $5 per thousand, right? So as our mill rate goes down, that multiplier gets smaller and smaller, which, as you say, was, this rapid decline in recent years. So my question is this a statewide phenomenon? Is the state just not paying out as many ERIP dollars as it used to?
So there's another step in that calculation. So when they figure out how much aid everybody gets, first it's yes or no, do you qualify? And so what the purpose of this is to make sure we still qualify now and into the future. Once you pass that test, that yes, we qualify, they figure out how much of that aid you're going to get. As you mentioned, they take our mill rate, subtract the $5, and whatever that differential is our number. But then they take the pot of money that's available in the aid program and they allocate it to all of the municipalities based on that number. So as all tax rates seem to be falling, people are falling out of the system. I could say there's a lot of area municipalities in particular, as Dane County is growing so much faster than a lot of the other areas of the state, that are falling out of that program faster. But that means then there's more money available in the pot because those communities are no longer in there. So yes, it's a statewide issue, but the state, as far as they're concerned, are paying the same amount of money. It's just a matter of who it goes to.
So the last municipality standing is going to get the whole pot.
Yep.
Any other questions? All right, we can move on to item 6C, Resolution R 17625, adopting special rules for the 2026 budget adoption, and this is a discussion only. We will take action at the council meeting. Misty?
Yeah, so I included in the packet the draft practice that we have followed the last couple of years. we tweaked it here and there over the last couple of years. The one that I'm proposing is the exact same as last year. However, it really only applies if we are concerned about bumping up against levy limits as we work through the amendments. But since none of the amendments impact levy limits, I don't expect we'll need to do these extra procedures. So still have it in here because at the point that this was put through, we didn't know what amendments were going to be on the floor, but don't expect it to be put to place.
Any questions about this? Seeing none, we can move on to the next item on the agenda, announcements. Our next committee of the whole meeting will be November 17, 2025. That is a different day than normal, so that is notable, November 17, and we will be doing interviews for the candidates to replace the vacancy for District 4, Seat 8. I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion by Ragsted and Dantzler. All in favor of adjournment, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. We are adjourned at 8:04 p.m. Thank you.